Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the MetaStellar YouTube channel. My name is Maria KOROLOV, and I'm the editor here at MetaStellar. And today's top free speculative fiction book on Amazon is about an author at a writing retreat when an electromagnetic pulse hits and takes out all electronics. But before we get to that, we've got 9 other books to get through on today's top 10 free ebook list. You see, every single Friday, the team here at MetaStellar reads the first few chapters of every book in that list. And today I was helped out by assistant fiction editor Terrence Smith, copy editor Melody Friedenthal, marketing assistant Lilibet Dominguez-Torres, and community members Alex KOROLOV and Tim McHugh. Thanks, everybody, for helping me out. I'm sorry none of them could join me here today, but maybe I'll see you guys next week. All right, so today's top 10 list, in addition to that EMP Pulse, includes War with Dragons, a private eye who can tell if someone's lying, and a time-traveling Edgar Allan Poe. The link to the article and to all the books is in the description box below. For those who are new, MetaStellar is an online magazine of speculative fiction. All the content is always free to our readers, thanks to the kind support of our Patreon contributors. We publish original short fiction, reprints, excerpts, essays, and lots of book reviews. And we also have our first anthology is out, and we're currently working on our second one. So absolutely submit your work, write reviews for us. All the contact information is down below. Get in touch. Okay, and now let's get into the list. Whew. Okay, the number 10 book on today's list is The Relic Bond by Jasper, Alden, and D.K. Holmberg, or it was as of the time of writing this article. This list changes a lot, so grab these books while they're still free. Authors and publishers make the books free for short periods, a day to 5 days, as a promotional thing to get people interested in the rest of the series. So if you want these books, grab them right away, because they might not be free for long. And this particular book, The Relic Bond, is the first of 6 books in the Lost Writers epic fantasy series. The other books are $5 each, but they're all in Kindle Unlimited. Kindle Unlimited is where you pay about $10 a month, and you read all the books that you want, as long as they're in the Kindle Unlimited program. A lot of books are. Last time I checked, the majority of books on the bestseller list in the sci-fi and fantasy category were in Kindle Unlimited. And that includes not just the free bestsellers, but the paid bestsellers, like the Harry Potter books. So this is definitely a fantastic deal if you read more than a couple of books a month, which I do. So no matter how I feel about Amazon, I subscribe to Kindle Unlimited because I get to read a lot of books. All right, so Jasper Alden's the first time I'm seeing that name, but D.K. Holmberg is a regular and a New York Times bestseller and a USA Today bestseller. And so that's always a good sign. And I liked Holmberg's other books. Okay, so Tim McHugh read the beginning of this book, and he says it takes place in a fantasy world where the Malarsan Empire rules over a lot of the land, and the world has sorcerers, queens, and dragons. So Tim says he loves high fantasy. It's his favorite genre by far. So he's definitely the target audience for this book. There's a prologue where General Kolas, one of the leaders of the Malarsan Empire, is fighting a war against dragons. And Kolas is a dragon slayer. And it starts out with him in a one-on-one battle with his 3rd dragon, a record in the army. And he uses his experience and skill to kill the dragon and is worshipped by the troops. And then in the next few chapters, we follow a relic hunter, Hal, who works for the queen, and his job is to find powerful relics that will help in their war against dragons. And Tim says that the book moves kind of slowly in these chapters. Hal and his mage protector find a relic deep in the jungle and bring it back to a queen. And from what Tim can tell, he didn't read this far, so he doesn't know, but he believes that Hal will eventually find a relic that awakens a power within him and will become an important piece in the war. So Tim isn't quite sure about the war against the dragons. Is it really a necessary war? Couldn't they have just left the dragons alone? but he doesn't really know yet why there's a war, so maybe it's justified. He also has a problem that the descriptions are going off into tangents and info dumps, and it's a slow beginning without a clear plot forming. He says there's potential for a good story here. Hal might have to come to grips with the great power. He might discover something about the kingdom or about the queen. But from what he's read so far, he's not going to finish this one. But if you've read and liked Holmberg's other books, and you like a slower paced epic fantasy that's part of a long series, check it out. It's free, and it's in Kindle Unlimited. Okay, next we have book number 9 on our list, Glimmer of the Other by Heather Harris. The first of 7 books in the Other Realm urban fantasy series. The other books are $2 to $5 each, but they're all in Kindle Unlimited. The last 2 books are scheduled to be released this May and this June, respectively, and are both available for pre-order. So the book, I read the beginning of this book, and it starts with our protagonist up in a tree in someone's backyard doing some discreet surveillance. I love that. The book had me from the first paragraph. I am exactly the target audience for this book, and I'll probably stick with it this weekend just based on the first paragraph alone. But I kept reading. The protagonist's name is Jinx. And she gets her compromising photographs, which are juicy. And she heads off to meet her client, the guy's wife, and like tell her what she found out, which was juicy. And then she goes home, and we find out about her backstory. So she's single. She's been a private eye for 7 years, and she has this ability to tell if someone is lying to her or telling the truth. She lives with her Great Dane, alone in a house that used to belong to her parents. Her parents are both dead. They were murdered in that house. And she hasn't really done much with the house except paint over the bloodstains. She takes the dog for a walk. And there's a murder in the park that she goes to. And then on the way home, something spooks the dog. But she kind of ignores both of those things because she's pretty calm and has her life together. I like her. And then the next day, a rich old lady hires her to find her granddaughter. And she takes the case and asks for a nice deposit and retainer and expenses. She's really organized. She's on time to the meeting. She's dressed appropriately. She knows how to run a business. She's got a cool superpower, and she's not a total idiot. I really, really like her. So even if this was a standard cozy mystery with no magical stuff, I'd stick with it. I mean, if it was just a standard private eye, she's the kind of character I would spend time with. But there's glimmers of strangeness, mostly around her dog, and her truth sensing abilities are nice. And judging by the cover, things are going to get a lot more supernatural as we go along. So I'm definitely sticking with this, and I might probably read the whole series. Next, we have Blood and Feathers by Beth Revis, a standalone epic fantasy book, but the author is a New York Times bestseller. Lilibet Dominguez-Torres read this one, and she says that the book is set in a world that's been divided by a powerful wall created with blood magic. And it's about Sign, who's the princess of the Bloodlands. And the Bloodlands have created and maintained the magic wall for hundreds of years to protect themselves from the huge and scary monsters that live on the other side. It's unclear, maybe there's somebody else there too, besides the monsters and the savage nomadic tribes that are there, but who knows? And Lilibet says that she's a fan of young adult epic fantasy and fantasy in general, but she just couldn't get into this book. There wasn't enough world building or context for her to understand what was going on. But her interest was piqued after she was able to see another point of view from a character on the other side of the wall, the side where the monsters live. And there's the whole thing with scary birds attacking the royal family while they're performing some sort of ritual that just made her confused and totally lost her. So she's not going to stick with the book because it didn't really catch her. But to me, it sounds a little bit like there's a Netflix series that was recently made about a fantasy world that's split by a giant magical rift. And I can't think of it now. If it comes to me before the end of the video, I'll mention it. But I might check it out. And I like the fact that the author is a New York Times bestseller. That's always a good sign that somebody writes really well. All right, next we have another book that I looked at. A Werewolf, a Vampire, and a Fae Walk into a Bar by Karpov, Kinrade, and Evan Gaustad. The first of 3 books in the Last Witch urban fantasy series. The other 2 books are $5 each, and this series is not in Kindle Unlimited. So I do like snarky urban fantasy very, very much. And I do like strong female protagonists. And I love the fact that the book's title is a joke. And I also like the fact that it's set in a bar in Massachusetts. All things I love. I myself live in Massachusetts. So the protagonist is Bernie. She's pregnant, about to give birth. She's working as a bartender in an Irish pub that she inherited from her grandfather that now belongs to her grandmother, I guess. And it's Tuesday night and only the regulars are there, but it's winter. There's a blizzard outside and she's closing down early. And then the bar shakes because something hit it. And she goes outside and pries this warm rock with glowing metallic veins out of the wall. Why did she do that? I don't know. It's warm. It's got glowing metallic veins. It sounds like something that would be radioactive. And she's pregnant. Don't touch things like that. But anyway, she pries it out of the wall and brings her inside with her. Then she's about to send everyone home when 3 hot guys walk into the bar. They all look like they came from some cosplay convention. Despite the fact that she's sworn off men until her kid is in college, and of course she's about to go into labor, she's interested in all 3 of them. She sends the regulars home. Only the 3 new guys are left when she goes into labor. There's a blizzard outside. She can't get to a hospital. She asks if one of the guys happens to be a doctor, and one of them isn't quite a doctor. He's a healer. And so the 3 of them deliver the baby. And it turns out that they came to the bar independently and just happened to arrive at the same time because her baby is part of some prophecy or other. And these 3 guys are old enemies or frenemies. And one's a vampire, one's a fae, and one's a werewolf. And they don't get along, but she's attracted to all 3 of them. Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I do not like this beginning. It is definitely fun. It's definitely an unusual premise, and I can see a love rectangle starting up here. And it's definitely readable. I mean, most books that make it to the top 10 list are extremely readable. And it is enjoyable, but there's like a little bit too much of that squishy romance thing in there. And like, what is she doing, really? You know, alone in a bar during a blizzard with no backup. She sent her friends and her regulars home, leaving herself with 3 guys about to give birth, pulling glowing rocks out of the wall. No. It's too much for me. I'm not going to stick with it, even though on the surface, it's the kind of book I like. All right, next we have Beauty is Sleeping by Smokey Moment. Standalone fantasy suspense novel from an author who has several paranormal romance books up on Amazon. So this book confused me. You know when I said that normally books that show up on this list are extremely readable? So even though I might not personally like the book, I can see sticking with it and enjoying reading it anyway. That's not the case for this book. It's really weirdly edited. So either there was a problem creating the EPUB formatting, or it's just was badly edited. but you get these like giant breaks between paragraphs, and then you have these big paragraphs with multiple people speaking in them all in one paragraph. So it's hard to tell who's saying what. And I'd have to read the same paragraph over a couple of times to figure out who's talking. So, and there's like grammar and sentence structure issues through this. So I was surprised to see this book on this list. It's very, very rare to get a book on a top 10 list that needs work. But the author does have other books up on Amazon and that are apparently doing well in the paranormal romance kind of genre and other romance kind of books. So she might well have a following of people who like her writing, like no matter what. Anyway, so the story is about Alice and Jake, two parents of a 3-year-old girl, Ivy, and the mom leaves the window open slightly at night, and the baby crawls out of there and waddles off into the forest, which the house is next to, and they discover she's missing the next morning and call the cops, and everyone's freaking out because they're worried that she was kidnapped. But anyway, the cops find her. She walked 4 miles into the forest, and they found her sitting there eating dirt, which sounds like something a 3-year-old would do. But for some reason, the parents are totally creeped out by the fact that she's been eating dirt. I mean, she's 3. She's going to eat dirt. And over the next couple of chapters, the mother's like really worried about this, and she does some research about kids eating dirt and doesn't find anything about it. Okay, lady, I just Googled kids eating dirt, and apparently it's something called pica, and 10 to 30% of all kids under 6 do it, and it's a really common compulsive eating disorder. So I don't know how she was doing her research, but the author didn't, and I'm very disappointed in this. I mean, I don't expect my fantasy books to be extremely detailed and accurate, but I expect the author to make at least a little bit of an effort to do some like really basic checking. So anyway, like I said, I was disappointed about there seemed to be like a step missing in this book in terms of editing and fact checking and proofreading and all that stuff. Then the next weird thing that happens is Alice and her husband are driving home with their daughter on the way back from carnival, and a large branch suddenly falls across the road, and a creepy, menacing-looking rabbit hops across, and it takes several men to move the branch. You know, a bunch of cars drive up and are stopped by this branch, and they all get out, and they're like, whoa, this branch is way heavier than it should be. It's taken a lot of us to move it. So, which is kind of weird. And then the next morning, Jake goes out and gets some firewood for their fireplace. He picks a small tree to chop down, and his chainsaw can't get a grip on it, can't even cut through the bark, even though it's a brand new blade. So these minor creepy things are happening. And I don't like creepy books or stories about children going missing, so I wouldn't be reading this book anyway. But I also have a problem with books that need editing because I edit for a living. And so I keep wanting to stop and put out a red pencil and like start marking everything up, send it back to the author and say, what are you trying to say here? You know, so yeah, so definitely not for me. But if you're a fan of the author, then it's free, pick it up. Okay, next we have another book that Lilivette read, Ignited by A.M. Deese. The first of 3 books in the Dance of the Elements epic fantasy series. The other books are $5 each, but they're both in Kindle Unlimited. So this is a young adult fantasy full of politics, palace intrigue, and secrets. And the protagonist is Jura, who's 17 years old and is heir to the first of the 13 council members. Okay, in the Republic of the Sand Sea. And Lilivette says that normally it's really boring to like see political stuff being discussed early in a book, but she says that it was actually intriguing to learn about the politics and how the council's decisions end up being made. And she says she wants to know more about them and the provinces they represent. And Ajura has been attacked by her father. One of their guards died protecting her. And her father has a blood chain on his wrist that means that he's someone's puppet. And Jura will stop at nothing to discover who did this to him. And then we meet another character, Ash, a powerful fire dancer who fights in an arena to prove himself. And so Lilibet says at the beginning gives you enough context and introductions to make you feel really interested in the world and its characters. But aside from that, it was kind of a slow pace. So she says that she wouldn't be sticking with it, but she'd recommend it to people who are looking for like kind of a heavy, meaty fantasy with magic, secrets, and dragons. Next, we have The Third Storm by Liz Hambleton. The first of 3 books in the Storm series of dystopian romance. The other books are $1 to $4 each, but they're both in Kindle Unlimited. Melody Friedenthal read this one, and she was sighing from the first page of this book. She's a copy editor. She's our copy editor here at MetaStellar. And so she's particularly attuned to copy editing issues. And she kept seeing awkward sentences and grammar mistakes. But she said she's going to read this book, or read the beginning of this book, and give it the old college try. So the book is about Rowan, who is an aunt to identical twin nephews, Lewis and Bo. Their mother is dead, and Rowan is raising the boys by herself. There's been a series of epic storms. In fact, the book opens with a flood so bad that the air mattress she and the boys are sleeping on has floated to within a couple of feet of the ceiling of their home's basement, where they've taken refuge during a flood. Okay. So Rowan wants to get herself and the boys to a ship where somebody named Dean has promised them a spot. And she can't tell if this is an old-fashioned sailing ship or a modern ocean liner or a spaceship. And then along the way to their ship, they find a man who's hurt but not completely dead. But instead of saving the guy, she keeps going, and the boys are really disappointed with her. They make it to Dean's house and steal his Jeep. And then she goes back for the injured guy, who turns out to be handsome and well-muscled. All right, they get to the shipyard, and Rowan has a list of instructions to follow that Dean gave her. She's supposed to take on the persona of a dead woman, pretend she's ex-military, and then ask for him over and over again. And the boys are supposed to fake sleeping. And she tells the gate guards that the unconscious guy is her husband, and that the 2 nephews are her children. And they're allowed to go through. Melody says that the story has possibilities, and she's going to read further before making a final judgment on it. Okay, next we have Sword of Secrets by S.M. Schmitz, the first of 4 books in the Heroes of Asgard urban fantasy series. The other books are $4 each, and the series is not in Kindle Unlimited. Schmitz has been on our list before. We reviewed The Immortals in October of 2021, which was the first of 4 books in the Immortals series. And from what I've read the description, this is a similar series to that, but like completely on its own. And it's about the old gods coming back to life, and people who are supposed to be heroes, like learning about their destinies. And our protagonist is Gavin, who is just a guy. He likes sweet beer and football. And the most interesting thing about him is that he lost his mother to cancer when he was 12. And when the book opens, he and his buddy are hanging out watching college football. When the game is interrupted for breaking news, some terrorists somewhere are claiming to be Sumerian gods and blow something up live on camera. They're demanding that the heroes protecting the earth give themselves up to be their slaves, or else humanity will pay. And they give a countdown clock, 72 hours. So Gavin is really annoyed by this because he was like really into the college football game. And so he's complaining about the interruption when there's a knock on the door, and a couple of women show up, an old woman and a hot blonde, and they demand that Gavin come with them. Apparently, he's one of those heroes that the terrorists are talking about. So he refuses to go. He refuses to believe them. So they drag him out. And when his friend tries to stop them, they drag him out too. These two women are pretty strong. And they take both of them with them to the airport where they have passports for them. And they're met by a couple of other guys. And for some reason, neither one of them complains to airport authorities that they're being kidnapped and taken to Iceland by crazy women who claim to be some kind of god-like folks or adjacent people. So he's like an idiot and I guess a coward. He also spells his name with a Y, which is super annoying. I hate that about him. And also, every time he sees a woman, the main description of her is how hot she is and whether he would sleep with her or not, which I find a little creepy and disturbing. So I don't like this guy at all. And normally I'd say, well, maybe he's gonna be killed very soon, and it's his friend who's gonna turn out to be the hero. But I doubt that because the book is told in the first person from Gavin's point of view. So I doubt that he's gonna be killed after 3 chapters in his head. I don't like being in his head, even if he does get a redemption arc. I don't want to stick around with him long enough to see it happen. So it is readable. It is very readable. It reminds me a bit of the Percy Jackson series, but with a slightly older demographic. So if you like this kind of story, it looks like it will shape up to be like a fun kind of action adventure, similar to the Percy Jackson books, except with like a global cataclysm. They have to save the planet kind of thing. Maybe a little bit like a Marvel universe kind of movie. So it could be fun, but not for me. Next, we have Death's Door by April White, the first and so far the only book in the Immortal Descendants Baltimore Mysteries, a time travel series. The book has won a ton of awards. However, it's a spin-off of another series, The Immortal Descendants, which has 6 books in it, all in Kindle Unlimited. So you might want to read those books first, because Terrence read this one and he was pretty confused. So the book is about Edgar Allan Poe time traveling to modern-day Maryland. And Terrence says he loves this premise, but it gets kind of like confusing. And so what happens is the protagonist is Ren, and she's working in a bar when Edgar Allan Poe walks in, and she immediately recognizes him as being the actual real Edgar Allan Poe. And Terrence wants to know, how the heck would you immediately know that somebody is actually Edgar Allan Poe instead of just some cosplay guy dressed as him? But apparently, Ren and this Edgar Allan Poe guy are both clockers, people who have the ability to jump between time periods. So there might be something supernatural about Ren, even though she seemed like a regular person at the beginning of the book. So Terrence likes very much the premise of Edgar Allan Poe, what he's doing in the modern day world and seeing him interacting with society, but he doesn't think that he's going to stick with the book. So I recommend that if you've read the other books by this author, then you should definitely check it out. But if you plan to be reading this one, and like I said, it won a ton of awards, then maybe you should check the other series out first. And finally, we have The Last Haven by Mary Wilkens. But before I explain to you what this book is about, I want to thank our Patreon supporters who are responsible for us being up and alive, including Marie LeClaire, Humphrey Price, Mary Stoll, Alexander Korolov, Avery Parks, Terrence Smith, Brad Center, David Perlmutter, Samantha Bryant, Melody Friedenthal, Anastasia Korolov, and Amira Lutfi. Thanks, you guys. We wouldn't exist without you. Okay, and let's get to the #1 best-selling sci-fi and fantasy book on Amazon today, as of this writing. Like I said, the list changes very quickly. So this is a standalone book of EMP Survival. However, the author has been on this list before a lot. I mean, EMP Survival books are like super popular right now, and Mary Wilkens is all over them. So in fact, she was just on this list last week, and she was on the list in March, and in February, and in January, and last November, and last October. Like, her books have really been doing very well. So an EMP book is an electromagnetic pulse, and that's an event that takes out all electronics but leaves living things unharmed. And it could be caused by a solar flare or by a nuclear blast or an EMP generator, aliens, you name it. And the premise of these books is usually some dude has been stockpiling weapons because he knows something's going to happen and everyone thinks he's crazy. And then his phone goes dead and he goes, oh my God, I was right, and starts machine gunning everybody before they get him, because society is about to collapse into chaos, because if his phone's dead, that means there's an EMP blast. So I have a problem with these books. Mary Wilkens seems to have a slightly saner approach to them, which might be why she's kind of popular with this genre. So in this book, the book starts out slowly. Instead of starting out with a cell phone going dead and a guy immediately starting to kill everybody around him, which I'm sad to say, a lot of books do begin that way. But here, the protagonist is Jane, an author who writes thrillers, and she's at a writer's retreat in Aspen with a handful of other authors. She's enjoying the retreat and a time away from home. She's a single mother with a 15-year-old son, and there's a little party that the authors have, and then she has a video conference call with a family back home. Her son's fine, talks with her parents who are taking care of him. They're all doing fine. And so that was like 3 chapters of the book, which is as far as Alex got. He says the story is a very, very slow build. Too slow for him. He likes it when the action starts out a little quicker. So he's not going to keep reading. But if you like your EMP books that have a more personal, like human-focused approach to surviving in a post-EMP world, check it out. It's free, and the author is really, really popular in this genre. All right, that is it for today's top 10 books. If you want to make sure you get these books and our reviews of them in your email box every Friday, our newsletter subscription link is in the description box below. And of course, you can also subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell, all those things. We put out a video like this every single Friday evening, so you can have your free reading for the weekend and maybe discover your next favorite author. So thanks, everybody, and I hope you have a great weekend, and I'll see you all next Friday. Bye-bye.